A severed head can remain conscious for up to 30 seconds after decapitation. A grotesque half-minute where the eyes blink, the lips try to speak, and the mind lingers between life and death. For Anne Boleyn, the second wife of Henry VIII and one of history's most infamous queens, this wasn't just a possibility, it was her final reality. But what if I told you her death was far more than a simple execution? What if it was a meticulously engineered performance, an act of royal theatre designed to destroy not only her body, but her legacy? May 19, 1536, the Tower of London, the same fortress where Anne had once prepared for her coronation, now served as her prison. Only 3 years earlier, she'd ridden through cheering crowds as the most powerful woman in England. Now, she waited in silence, accused of adultery, incest and conspiracy, crimes she almost certainly never committed. Henry VIII's government called it justice. In truth, it was annihilation disguised as law. For 17 days, Anne endured psychological torment, interrogations, sleepless nights, and the cruel uncertainty of when her death would come. Her execution was delayed repeatedly, each postponement breaking her a little more. And when Henry ordered a French swordsman instead of an English headsman, it wasn't mercy. It was choreography. A queen's death had to be theatrical. What unfolded on that May morning wasn't just a beheading. It was the final act of a king's revenge. An execution so calculated, so psychologically torturous, that 5 centuries later, we're still piecing together its horror. Before Anne's head ever met the sword, her destruction had already begun, carefully scripted and ruthlessly executed. In the spring of 1536, Thomas Cromwell, Henry VIII's cunning minister, turned whispers into weapons. He assembled false confessions, coerced testimony, and manufactured charges that turned Anne's every gesture into evidence of treason. Her flirtations became seductions. Her laughter became conspiracies. Even her brother George was accused of incest, a crime so vile it erased sympathy in an instant. The brilliance of Cromwell's campaign lay not in evidence, but in emotion. He transformed Anne from a reformist queen into a national villain. Pamphlets spread through London describing her as a seductress who had bewitched the king and corrupted England's morals. To the public, her downfall seemed not only just, it seemed necessary. Inside the Tower, Anne faced something far crueler than physical pain: psychological dismantling. She was kept isolated from her allies, questioned without end, and deprived of sleep. One day she'd be told she would live, the next that she'd die at dawn. Each delay fractured her reality. Even her ladies-in-waiting were spies, reporting every word and gesture to Cromwell's agents. She prayed, wept, then laughed, oscillating between denial and acceptance. The human mind, cornered by fear, will do anything to survive. Anne's final days reveal a terrifying truth about Tudor justice. Execution began long before the sword ever fell. Meanwhile, Henry played the part of a grieving husband in public, but privately, he prepared for remarriage. Days before Anne's death, he was already exchanging letters with Jane Seymour, the woman who would replace her. When the court found Anne guilty, after a trial where the verdict was written before the hearing, the Queen didn't plead for mercy. She simply said, "Never prince had a wife more loyal." By then, the Crown's propaganda had achieved its goal. England no longer saw a wronged queen, they saw a monster. The stage was set, the script complete, and Anne was its final performer. Anne's final night on earth was one of eerie calm and unbearable suspense. For hours she prayed in her tower chamber, sometimes whispering, sometimes laughing to herself, a sound that chilled even her guards. She requested the sacrament at 2 a.m, kneeling in silent communion until dawn. Every prayer, every breath was preparation for the inevitable. but Henry wouldn't grant her the peace of knowing when it would happen. Her execution had been scheduled, postponed, and rescheduled again. Each false dawn became a form of torture. The uncertainty was deliberate, an unspoken message from her husband. "You die when I decide." When the lieutenant of the tower finally came for her, Anne thanked him for his kindness. Witnesses said she even smiled, remarking that, "The executioner is very good, and I have but a little neck." It was gallows humour masking terror, a woman forcing herself to control the narrative one last time. She dressed with care, choosing a modest grey gown trimmed with ermine. She would not go to death as a seductress, but as a queen. Her ladies wept as they pinned her hood and fastened the cloak she would soon remove. Outside, the air was bright and deceptively peaceful. The crowd waited, hushed but restless. Rumours swirled that Henry himself might attend. He didn't. He was already celebrating his next marriage miles away. Anne's mind must have fractured under the weight of contradiction, betrayed by her husband, condemned by her peers, yet still clinging to dignity. Historians describe her composure as serenity. Psychologists would call it dissociation, the body's final defense against terror. In those last hours, Anne's thoughts likely circled her daughter, the 2-year-old Elizabeth. Would she remember her mother? Would she ever know the truth? For Anne, the fear of oblivion, the possibility of being erased, was worse than death itself. Morning broke over the Tower of London with an almost unnatural stillness. A low mist clung to the battlements, blurring the edges of reality. The Thames lapped against the walls like a slow heartbeat. Londoners gathered beyond the gates, their chatter rising like a tide of morbid excitement. Inside, Anne prepared herself. She had not slept. Her prayers had become mechanical repetitions. Words meant more to steady her breath than summon salvation. When the lieutenant entered to escort her, she smiled faintly. "I hear the executioner is very swift," she said. Her composure frightened even him. The walk to Tower Green was lined with soldiers. The cobblestones that had once borne her coronation procession now echoed her final steps. Some of the guards bowed their heads, others stared blankly forward. The crowd beyond strained for a glimpse of the condemned queen. The scaffold was smaller than most, barely 3 feet high. It was designed that way deliberately, forcing Anne to face her audience as equals, not as a queen above them. The straw at her feet had been freshly laid to soak up blood. Nearby, the French swordsman waited silently, his blade hidden in a bundle of hay. Anne ascended the steps, pausing only to remove her cloak. When she turned to face the crowd, the murmurs fell away. In that moment, she was not the accused nor the adulteress. She was a queen once more. Her final words were as measured as they were brilliant. "Good Christian people, I am come hither to die, according to the law. And by the law I am judged to die, therefore I will speak nothing against it." She did not confess. She did not apologize. She acknowledged the law but not its justice, a subtle rebellion hidden beneath ritual obedience. Her final speech was an act of controlled defiance, preserving her dignity in a world determined to strip it away. She knelt upright, French style, hands folded in prayer. Her lips moved silently. "Jesu, receive my soul." The executioner, trained for speed, quietly stepped behind her. "Where is my sword?" he called, his distraction to make her turn her head. And then, silence. A single stroke. The thud of steel on flesh. Witnesses said her lips continued to move for several seconds after. Some swore she prayed even after the blade had done its work. Others fainted at the sight. No coffin awaited her. Her weeping ladies were forced to place her head and body into an old arrow chest and bury her in the chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula among common traitors. No hymns, no markers, just an erased queen beneath cold stone. By afternoon, Henry wore white, announcing his engagement to Jane Seymour. His machinery of power moved on as if Anne had never existed. Her portraits were destroyed, her emblems chiselled from walls, her name forbidden. But history has a way of remembering what kings try to forget, because from that same bloodline, Elizabeth Tudor, rose a monarch who would outshine them all. Anne Boleyn's death wasn't a tragedy of love, it was a demonstration of power, the psychological and political annihilation of a woman who refused to stay silent. Even as her body turned to dust beneath the tower stones, her spirit endured. Because power may silence a voice, but it can never kill a truth.